Hey guys, what's going on? And welcome to a new video. It's actually my first video on this new channel, so let's get into it. So I'm running a +7 Theater of Pain. I'm actually just plugging keys at the moment, trying to get gear. 7s are the most efficient for trying to farm loot. They drop 200 eye level stuff, which is the same between +7 and +9 keys. So we're going through and we're just trying to run as many keys as possible at the moment. I'm currently 197, 198 eye level now. I think I've actually had a couple of upgrades since this. Actually get an upgrade in this video, I believe. So yeah, I'm playing Guardian Druid, and most people immediately look at Guardian Druid as just being kind of some meme tank. They're not actually a real tank. They'd much rather be taking the Vengeance Demon Hunters, the Protection Pallies, the DKs, because Guardian Druid just doesn't seem to be seen as a real tank. So I'm actually running the wrong legendary for this, but I'm glad I did, because it just shows how strong Guardian Druid is, even without like the crutch of having a really strong legendary, which we do at the moment. So we're just getting into the first boss here. I always focus the Accuser first. He does Necromantic Bolt. Doesn't actually do the same as the health absorb bolts that we see in other dungeons. So it's purely habit that I focus this guy first. But there's two casters on this fight. What I tend to do is whichever one I'm focusing, I kick that one, drag it to the other one when he disappears. Just to keep them all together. You really want to be able to cleave this fight. As you can see, we have a Warlock doing 6.5k damage overall in the dungeon so far, just because he's able to keep them cleave kind of fights up. Important mechanics to notice. The Accuser does Searing Death. It's nothing really to worry about. It just drops stuff on the floor. I believe that's what it does anyway. Again, not much. From a tank's perspective, what we want to be focusing on is interrupting the rogue when he comes up. Every class can do this. However, as a tank, you tend to have a lot of CC to be able to do it. So I just charge to him, and I use my Roar just to interrupt that. The Decapitator, let's not say that right, uses Mortal Strike. It does reduce your healing as it does like for a warrior. It doesn't do all that much. It isn't a tank buster as such. It just puts a nasty debuff on you. Honestly, you can pretty much just ignore it. Maybe pop a defensive once it's up, but or for me, I made sure I had Iron Flare up. That was about it. So I'm just actually going through my gear here while we're going through the transition. I'm using both DPS trinkets. That's because I'm actually a Feral main spec, hence the Feral legendary as well. But honestly, tanking isn't hard at the moment. You don't need to be stacking tank trinkets and things like that. I have actually just got a nice new tank trinket upgrade, which does a lot of damage as well. So it's a bit of it's kind of the best of both worlds there. So we're going to go to Zav first, and this is my normal route. We kill the challengers, and then we come down and do Zav. This is because Zav is probably the easiest boss of the 5. He doesn't really do anything too much, and as long as you kill the banners, you can avoid the dance. So the trash isn't particularly hard. These mini bosses do quite a lot of damage if you stand in any of the mechanics, but the thing is you can avoid most of the mechanics. This boss has a Ravager type mechanic, or this mini boss has a Ravager type mechanic. You just stand out of the way of the swords. He has an interrupting roar that does kind of group wide damage. You can ignore it most of the time. Just let your healer kind of top themselves up. And then he does a actual whirlwind based on himself. You just stand out for that. It's a very simple mini boss. There's nothing really you should worry about. Now, as you saw there, I actually stood up a Wild Growth in the middle of this. You'll see this a lot in my runs. Druid is a hybrid class, and it's the true hybrid class in WoW. Play it like a hybrid class. You have so much healing at your disposal if you play Resto Affinity. You'll actually see during this. I mean, so I held 2.2k HPS in that fight. Fine, I healed myself quite a lot as well. But actually, you can heal so much in these Mythic Pluses just as being a tank. Your mana is used for nothing else. Don't worry about it. Just heal as much as you can. Now, this boss, he does Interrupting Roar again, which is the same group-wide damage. He also does a Ground Smash, which is just a target floor thing, which you can avoid. He also then does a Colossus Smash, which is a tank buster. Now, if you have any tank that can actively mitigate this through something like dodge, parry, or block, you can actually avoid getting the debuff. If you actually get hit by it, it applies a debuff increasing your damage taken. But that's about it. I tend to try to make sure I have Iron further up, but that's about it. I didn't for that one, and I took almost no damage. And fine, it's only a +7, but right now +7s are where we want to be. That's our perfect key. Now this is probably the first hard trash pack in the dungeon. The captain reduces the AoE damage taken by anyone around it, all the allies around him, as well as increasing their damage. What I tend to do on higher keys, so I have done a 10 times of this, what I tend to do is root the captain, pull the rest of the pack around the corner with line of sight. It means that you get a nicer pull, you AoE everything down, and then you pull the captain on its own. For this, it was a +7. We had a very good group. I wasn't particularly worried that the captain was going to cause many issues, so we just pushed through. And again, there's not really many mechanics on this fight other than just kill the captain. Lots of healing needed. The healer put out almost 5k HPS at some points in that fight. Fair play, it was a lot of healing, but he managed to get through it and it was a clean kill. Now the last mini-boss, again, they don't do anything particularly much. This one is the tank version. He isn't actually the tank version. He's I think it's an arms warrior, has like the sweeping strikes, able to hit multiple targets at once. That's all this boss does. He hits a little bit faster and he'll cleave anything nearby. Doesn't do all that much damage, honestly. You can pretty much just ignore it. The whirlwind, again, just stand out of the whirlwind mechanic. It's not a hard mechanic. And then you want to just avoid I believe he does unbalancing blow. Now this actually does hurt. So not only is it a tank buster, it reduces your parry, dodge, and block by 100%, meaning you cannot avoid any mechanics by just kind of chance. So just be a bit careful with that one. It does do a little bit of damage. As you can see, they actually got chunked by that on its own. Just be careful. So we're actually going to go up to Zav now. Zav is my favourite dungeon boss fight. Actually borderline favourite boss fight of the expansion so far. It's very Final Fantasy dance. It's all about mechanics as opposed to just like raw DPS, and I really, really enjoy that. So here's a couple of different mechanics. The first one, as you can see right now, is the brutal combo. Does a lot of damage on a tank. Okay, I popped Survival Instincts there and I still felt it. You've got to be aware that it's going to do some damage, and you're probably going to need some sort of either active mitigation or like defensive cooldown up. Now we're on the dance fight here. I actually can't DPS him because I'm a melee. I healed so much in that. I actually healed 2.6k HPS. That's a lot of healing there. You've got to be aware that while you're doing nothing else, throwing a heal out definitely helps the group. The second mechanic is the banner. Now the banner does a pulsing group wide slow. Now that makes the dance so much harder having that up. To a point it's almost impossible. So as soon as it comes up, full focus, switch to it and get it down. The third mechanic is the duel. Now, in Mythic 0, when you're not timed, absolutely go down, kill each other, have a good duel. On Mythic Plus, I would suggest having someone that's dedicated to win the fight, because the winner gets an extra 10% damage done, and the loser gets an extra 10% damage loss. So, obviously, net DPS is about the same, but you don't want to be using cooldowns and things down there. As much as it's fun to kill your friends, you don't need it. At this point, obviously, Mythic Plus is about the time, and you want to be as efficient as possible with that. Now, the boss does a couple of different mechanics on the dance. He does the frontal slam right in front of him. He then does a line slam. He does a half arena slam, and he does a circle. They're all very, very simple to dodge, and there's just no reason to be getting hit unless there's banners up, of which case, if there's banners up, you should be interrupting them anyway. So we've killed Zav. We've still got 3 minutes on Bloodlust, but that's absolutely fine. We're going to go to Cull next. Cull is borderline the hardest fight in here. Mechanically, it's probably not the hardest fight, but in pure kind of throughput needed, healing needed, it's absolutely a hard fight. But you're going to see how we manage to mitigate that in a second. Now, we've got this pull here. Some tanks do this very, very differently. Some pull right to the end and cleave them all down, and that's probably the tactic that will get you the fastest time. However, it's the most risky. I'm looking at the time here. We've got 27 minutes to time. I was never worried about time in this dungeon. But they wanted a 2 chest, and actually it was quite a nice thing to achieve, so let's go and do a 2 chest. We had plenty of time, so I thought I'd rather not risk it. And even then, we only pulled half of this, and it still does a lot of damage. You can see I'm pulling 3k HPS at the moment, helping out the healing and keeping myself alive so that the healer can focus on everyone else. You need a lot of healing to be able to do this all in one. I would recommend just not bothering. But we get them down. I play this, like I said, a little bit more like a gauntlet. And again, we kill the last 3 souls, and we get into, again, a very, very healing intensive ad. So these ads, the only thing you want to kick is the bind soul. It does slow you a little bit, which obviously helps with your, or doesn't exactly help when you're standing in the swirlies on the floor. So we have the Portal Guardian. These require a lot of healing through the Soul Storm. However, as it is on its own, it probably won't kill your group at the moment. This is a fortified week on a +7, with obviously people not being fully geared, and we're still able to kind of go through it fairly well. If he puts the curse on, as you can see on the rogue at the moment, that's when it starts to get a little bit more intense. The curse increases your damage taken by 40%. Very, very key to dispel that, because it will do a lot of damage. Now, I'm actually testing the routes at the moment to go left or right here. The Bone Mages do a couple of different mechanics. One is Bone Spear, which is randomly aimed. If that gets off and they cast it on the same target, they'll insta-kill someone. That's an issue. But you can control them really well to a point they do almost nothing through the whole fight. You saw, so he cast 1 Bone Spear, he nearly insta-killed our healer. They do a lot of damage, but if you can control them, there's no real risk to it. The other side, there's more mobs. So I personally prefer the Bone Mages, but it's personal preference at the moment. You'll still get the percentage either way. So on this fight, again, you have a Bone Magus, which is able to do lots of damage to a single person. You have a Soul Binder, which does Necrotic Bolt Volley. Sorry, very difficult to say. Which will hit the whole group and absorb some healing. That is the killer on this fight, honestly. And then you have the Portal Guardian, which is still going to be doing the curses and still going to be doing Soulstorm for lots of AoE damage. You're going to have to kick out some healing on this one, unfortunately. It's just the way it goes. You can't just kind of force your way through this fight. The healing is the key part here. Now, we get through to the next mob in this dungeon, which are these Dark Speakers. They do 2 mechanics, that, as far as I remember. Spirit Frost, which is a single target kind of shadow bolt as such. And they do Death Winds. Death Winds is a targeted on someone, single, just knockback. If you get hit by it, it's very, very hard to avoid getting knocked off, so you've just got to be careful. Having 2 of them is not fun, and there's been a few times already where I've died by staying on one of these. There is actually a 3rd mechanic which I forgot about, which is the curse. There's a curse it puts on players which can effectively makes them leave swirlies on the floor. You can dispel this. You should. I mean, it just makes it kind of better for the DPS if you are dispelling that for them and not having to worry about it. This is the hardest pull in the dungeon. Yay! You've got a Bone Magus, Soul Binder, and the Dark Speaker on one platform. Again, so you've got a Bone Magus which can one-shot people almost by himself. You have a Soul Binder which does AoE damage to galore if you get it wrong. And you have a Dark Speaker which will knock people off any opportunity. And of course puts the curse on people that needs dispelling, otherwise you're going to leave swirlies on the floor. Now you just saw my Druid die. He literally got insta-killed by a Bone Magus. There's nothing we can do about that other than interrupt it. Okay, you can't just heal through it. You can't just force your way through it. You have to deal with this platform very well. The issue is this platform is right before the kind of one of the hardest throughput fights in the dungeon. So you can't really use too many cooldowns. So it's up to you how your group manages this. Me personally, I tend to use a cooldown just to do as much damage as I can here because my boss damage isn't great anyway. And we just push through to try and get the kill. Now, Kolthrok does a couple of different mechanics. The most important one is the Draw Soul. So he's going to target 2 players. They will always be DPS as far as I know, unless there isn't 2 DPS alive, in which case he'll either pick the tank or the healer. He will target them, drain their soul, and that will do no damage. The damage comes when their soul is drained and out of their body. You'll have to go and pick your soul back up before you can do any damage, because you'll be silenced during that, and once you get it, you'll do a little bit more damage, which is nice. Now, as you just saw my group do here, there was hands that spawn on the floor. You can both go and stand in the hands to trap your soul and grab them. That's the way the mechanic's supposed to play. However, if you don't have a hands up, you just have to be able to work around it. Again, having a druid, you can use raw here just to keep everyone moving a bit quicker during that phase. Again, you see me popping up and doing a bit of healing. I mean, I'm doing 2.4k HPS at the moment, which is helping my group just be really, really steady. All these things really do help. You also get Parasite, I believe that's what it's called. Whatever it's called, it does a lot of damage. You can dispel it, however there's two, and obviously if you only have your healer that can magic dispel, you're not going to be able to dispel both. So be smart about who has it. If someone gets Draw Soul and they have the Parasite, dispel them, because they're not going to be able to survive having both on them at the same time. Just be sensible. If your tank gets it, your tank should be able to just ignore it. Now, again, we killed it very simple. You look at the healing, we needed about 5k HPS to get through that boss. It wasn't particularly scary for us. You could probably get through with a little bit less, but that's just the way it is. Now we get into Gorechop. Gorechop himself, the boss, is very easy. It's actually the trash that is going to cause you issues in this one. You have these sludge spewers, which do a couple of different mechanics. The first one is Decaying Filth, which is just a targeted damage which leaves a disease on you. The second one is Withering Discharge, that's the one. As you just saw on the screen there, that is a key thing to interrupt. If you don't interrupt, it's going to hit the whole group for a lot of damage and leave a dot on that will likely kill you. If you let one of these go off, you might survive. If you let two of these go off, it's almost game over every time. Especially as you get to higher keys, and during a fortified week, you've just got to be careful. Now, if you can interrupt both of these mechanics, actually everything else isn't too bad. These butchers do, I believe, just one mechanic, which is Chop. Now, it will just target the closest melee if the tank's out of the range. It doesn't do all too much damage, but it does do a fair bit. Now, you've got a Butcher, which again just does a bit of tank damage, nothing else really, and two Spewers here. I tend to mark a target as the tank and go, that's the target I'm focusing on. One, having a skull on a target, it just instantly makes DPS brains go, I need to kill that target. The second part is it means I know which one I'm interrupting, and the other one is then down to everyone else. As a tank, especially a Tor and Druid, we have War Stomp, we have Interrupt, we have Incap Roar, we have Souls if we have someone else that can do a knockback. We have plenty of ways to interrupt people. You can probably do it all by yourself. As you can see, I'm actually kind of chaining pulls here. Normally I wouldn't do this. I hate these gas bags. They do a lot of damage if you make a mistake. And Blizzards, being the infinite wise people they are, don't give you much space here. Guess that's intentional. But yeah, so these gas bags, they do swirlies on the floor, and they also do a burp and a fart, which will do quite significant damage if you stand in it. I believe someone stands in one on this one or the next gas bag. They do a lot of damage. On a 7, they were nearly insta-killing people. As a tank, you can probably just ignore it if you get stood in it, but as a DPS or a healer, it's going to hurt. Now, as you see, I'm running between fights here. Going to start checking some rejues up. Going to start checking some heals out. There's no reason not to. Now, you've got another Sludge Spewer here. Again, instantly, everyone starts jumping on the Sludge Spewer. That's the way that fight should be. Now, you've got a new mob here, which is the Diseased Horror. He doesn't do all too much, but he does do a Meat Shield, which does a significant amount of absorb on himself. He also does a stacking debuff on you, which stacks up on the tank, which stacks up and does a fair bit of damage. Now, as you see, I just pulled the gas bag. You could pull it with the next pack, which is a load of ghouls. The ghouls themselves aren't too hard other than one Sludge Spewer. I like to pull him up here, though, because you have so much more space. And if you do it down there and he does it forward and backward along the bridge, it's very, very hard to avoid for everyone. So it's just not worth risking. As you can see, I stood up there, tried to wild growth, and nearly got slaughtered. You've got to be a little bit sensible when you're kicking heals out, but there are a lot of opportunities when you can. So again, I've got 6 stacks of the debuff at the moment. I'm fairly overgeared for these now. I'm not really taking too much damage. When I first started, 6 or 7 stacks was actually starting to influence how I was playing a fight. I would kite a little bit more and things like that. So yeah, just be a little bit careful on these pulls. If you interrupt the horror before he gets his cast off, you interrupt the absorb completely. If you interrupt it after the cast has gone off, but while he's channeling, he'll still get an absorb. It will just be much lower. So again, you have ghouls here. Ursul's Vortex, absolutely lovely. Binding Shot, another one which would be very, very nice. Again, all of the ghouls jumped onto a boomy. I believe he also then stood in something. Just got slaughtered. You can die from just random things. Don't worry about it if you die too much. We still have so much time here that dying is not an issue right now for us. A wipe would be an issue, but single deaths from random mechanics, we don't have to worry about too much. Again, so I'm focusing on interrupting the diseased horror, the meat shield, just because it slows the fight down if he's getting absorbs off every time, and it seems to be the one we're focusing anyway. So we're getting really close to Gorechop. Gorechop has a couple of different mechanics. The main mechanic of the fight is the hooks. So he does her hooks with 2 separate gaps in for you to run through. Just behind the original line of hooks, he will also then add another hook where the gaps were. So just be careful. Basically, you run through the gap and then you run into space. It's not too hard. He does a tank buster. It's not too bad on this one, honestly. 1 or 2 kind of Iron Furs was enough to get through. That's called Hateful Strike. Here we go. Again, it dropped me about 30% of my health, but I didn't really have a cooldown up for it. He does Tenderizing Smash as well, which he likes to pull you in just before the hooks. Most people don't like the mechanic. Actually, use it as an indicator. If you get Tenderizing Smash, hooks are coming, be ready to move. That's your indication that, okay, something's about to happen. Again, we're not really worried about too much about any of the other ghouls here. They don't do all too much. You just kind of cleave them down. Again, the hooks have a little bit of a bigger hitbox than they actually look like. I think I did stand in that one anyway, though. For me as a tank, it leaves a little bit of bleed on you. Probably able to ignore it. If you get hit as DPS, it's not too horrible, but again, you're adding extra healing when you shouldn't really need it. So that Hateful Strike there, I had no mitigation up at all. It did about 45% of my health. Obviously, Guardian Druid, I have naturally high armor and high health anyway, so just be aware that if you have nothing up for it, it's still going to hurt. Obviously, on a Tyrannical week, that's going to really hurt, so just be very careful. We're getting to a point where we're about to finish. This was a horrible little thing. We either had to stand in the Tenderizing Smash or the hooks. I chose the Smash because I could mitigate it. If we positioned a little better and didn't leave the goo in the middle of the floor, we could have probably done it much better. The little ads, when they die, they leave the goo on the floor. So just be careful where you leave it. Running back now to the last boss. So as you can see, we've got 6 minutes on the time. We actually make a weird decision here, and it's about going slow to go faster. Now, my motto in Keys is slow and steady. It's one of those things that if we rushed here, this fight is so horrible that rushing could... We might have got it first try, and we might have killed it with a minute or 2 to spare, or a minute or 2 extra. That's all well and good, but actually you see that this fight is very, very close. Me personally, I'd rather do it with Bloodlust. We end up not doing it with Bloodlust anyway, but that's just because of mistake. So we choose to wait for the Bloodlust. We still have 5.5 minutes. We get 1 opportunity with Bloodlust. Had we have gone without Bloodlust, we might have got 2 opportunities if we wiped the first time. But I had faith that we don't wipe. I believe that we had a good enough group that we could kill the boss. Wasn't too much of an issue. So we're just getting ready. This boss has a couple of different mechanics and 2 phases. The first one, he has a tank buster, which is the Scythe. Does a fair bit of damage, a lot less than Hateful Strike, honestly. You can pretty much just ignore it. He then does a Grasping Rift. Now this will put a circle around you, and it will drag you towards a rift at the end of the a part of the platform. You want to run away, while leaving the ads that the circle spawns as close as possible. You'll see the mechanic in a minute, and I will explain it a little bit more then. So Reaping Scythe is the tank buster. Again, I didn't really have active mitigation up, and it did a fair bit of damage, but nothing really to worry about. It also does Dark Devastation. It's a beam. It rotates. Don't stand in the beam. Our healer decided he was just going to run through it. He survived. Grasping Rift. This is the mechanic I was talking about. So ideally what we'd want to do is get these circles as close as possible so that you can cleave the ads down straight away. The ads randomly target and cast something called Death Bolt, which is just a single target damage. It does a fair bit, and with all the damage in this fight already, you really don't want to leave these ads up for too long. I'm actually helping heal again during this beam. My single target boss damage isn't great, okay? I would rather keep our group alive and make sure that we're surviving. Bear in mind, we've just taken a lot of damage. My HOTS are still running. I'm actually still helping heal. Than do an extra maybe 20-30k damage that ultimately won't make a difference to the boss result. Where I'm tanking in right now, so this is the second phase, where I'm tanking in right now, you can almost always avoid the bulls with just kind of very small movements left or right. I like to tank him there. We have a lot of range in this anyway, so it doesn't really make too much difference. You can also avoid a lot of the inner ghosts. So there's two phases of ghosts here. I do apologise about the Discord message. I couldn't actually get rid of it, and I forgot to turn the overlay off. So there's two phases of ghosts. You've got the ghosts that charge. They will one-shot you, and you have the melee ghosts, which do a lot of damage if you stand on it. Probably not a one-shot, but very close. Again, you can stand on the edge, and you can pretty much avoid that whole mechanic. But hey, we did it, and after much farming, I finally got my 200 eye level weapon. Happy days. So guys, look, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will be doing many more videos to come in the future, so please, if you liked the video, subscribe, and there will be more to come in the future. Okay? Thanks for watching. Catch you later. Bye.